Sorry, nice pyjamas.
Thanks. Nice towel.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Haunting the Narrative. I'm Meg and I'm here with...
Mairead! Another new combination for you guys.
I know, we're trying to, like Pokemon, we're trying to catch all the pairings possible amongst the four of us. But we are here today to talk about a topic I have been dying to talk about since the very beginning, which is fashion and style in Lockwood Co. And today we are going to be talking about both the books and the show for once. So none of this usual only books, even though I guess it is mostly books.
It's mostly books, but we have more book content than show. And I just want to say, no better person to talk about this than Meg, who has many, many thoughts. I'm so excited to talk through all of those with you. I
am very excited to share them. So thank you so much,
Mairead. You guys should see the things that she was researching. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting time.
I went down many rabbit holes, as you will soon hear. But yeah, let's dive right in. So you might be wondering why we're going to talk about this at all. And there are so many reasons. I know it's easy to think fashion or style or the way that we dress is frivolous or a fluffy topic. But as per many topics that people tend to dismiss easily, I think that it's actually deeply significant. I feel like I gave a similar spiel about romantic comedies and romance at the beginning of that episode.
You just love an underdog.
I do love an underdog. As someone who's a background in like cultural history, I just think these things are really important. And style is so linked to our personal identities. It's how we present ourselves to the world. It's the first impression of us that many people get. The way that we dress is deeply connected to class, and it can also have religious connotations. Before we were recording this episode, Mairead brought up the example of nuns and religious sisters and how they dress. Like that has a very specific connotation. And that's true of many religions have particular garments that they associate that are used to show their devotion or a particular religious practice. But beyond that, on a very basic personal level, the way we dress also can connect us to our families and our ethnic cultures. The way we dress can be practical, it can be beautiful, and sometimes it can be both. So it can really also show a reflection of what we value and what message we want to put out in the world. And that's very much seen in the Lockwood Co book. So we're going to talk about that a lot today. And historically speaking, one of the things and Mairead is going to indulge me talking about today is just some little bits here and there of fashion history. Because the evolution of fashion is deeply significant, particularly when we talk about the way women dress. And we always frequently associate specific items with specific time periods in history. And fashion is also a commonly used device in literature. So there are some very classic examples of this. I think the first one that always comes to mind to me is the Scarlet Letter and that embroidered A on her dress in that book. That is a very clear symbol and message that, if you read that book in a high school literature class, you've probably already analyzed it to death. So I'll spare you from talking about it more here. But we also see other examples of this in Gone with the Wind. Scarlet makes her dress out of the curtains after the war. It's hard to imagine also other characters without their signature items of clothing. In The Great Gatsby without his suits, that is pretty much impossible for me personally to imagine. It's such a key part of his identity. We also see jewelry, things like Breakfast at Tiffany's. We have those pearls there, but we also have the other side of jewelry when we talk about Tolkien and his one ring, and many other rings that are important in that series.
I'm pretty sure actually that Tolkien's use of rings as magical items was inspired by the Norse myths that he was so into, that all these in sagas and ancient myths, jewelry as kind of a conveyor of meaning, or a representation of some significant office or power. It's something that goes very far back in time. Even just the idea of a king and his seal. I don't know if anyone's read the Meg and Mairead Turner books.
I have not.
Oh my gosh, Meg, you would love them. You really have to read those.
I'll have to write this down.
I think you'd adore them, yeah. Yeah. Megan Whalen Turner, The Thief. I think there's a lot of overlap already between like the Lockwood Co fandoms and that fandom. But yeah, great series of books, really makes use of dress and the meaning of dress and the way people use it as a costume and the way it reveals us. It's really well done. One scene I love from maybe the third book in that series is when someone brings a message from the king. There's a king, you just have to roll with it.
Accept it.
And they come bearing the king's signet ring. And when they hold his signet ring, they're talking in the person of the king. So they're bearing his voice there. So yeah, just how an item of jewelry can actually be representative of the self, or just any piece of clothing. I mean, I think everyone knows that I'm a religious nerd. I mean, the depth of meaning in liturgical clothing is insane. Like, I had it explained to me recently, and it's just like, you know, you may or may not have seen a Catholic priest come out on the altar and he's got like a couple of layers on. Every single one of those layers has like several different meanings. It's very interesting. And like the different colors depending on the different seasons. So yeah, there is so much, symbolism and so much communication that we do through our clothing that I think if you're a storyteller, it would be really short-sighted not to make use of that. I mean, obviously, not everyone is going to be passionate about outfits, and even if you are passionate about clothes, you're not always going to be able to dress that way because
it's just not practical.
No one got the energy. It's not practical. It's not practical. No one has the energy. No one has the time. But I think a total disregard for appearances. If you'll allow me to be really pretentious for a second,
we will. That's what we're here for. Always.
No, I was going to say that a total disregard for appearances is kind of a form of Gnosticism. So this sort of Manichaeist idea of like body, flesh, bad, soul, spirit, good. I mean, it's true that what's on the inside counts more than what's on the outside, but it's important not to forget as well that our inside is like mediated to the rest of the world through our outside. Like we're corporeal beings, so the way that we present ourselves always matters. And I mean, sometimes you're presenting yourself as a respectable professional. Sometimes you're showing up in a sloppy hoodie because it's a cry for help. I have done that.
I think we all have.
Sometimes, but it is, I mean, to kind of shrug your shoulders at it and say it doesn't matter, or to say, oh, you know what, like ornamentation, it's not important. It's just it's such a utilitarian worldview, and I think we always lose something. We always lose an opportunity for connection when we take a utilitarian perspective. So that could never be me.
Never. And as we were putting together this episode, I kept thinking about this quote from The Devil Wears Prada, which I hope is a movie you've all seen. And I know it's also a book, but I unfortunately haven't read the book. I always just think of the epic delivery of this line, of course, by Meryl Streep, who talks about how fashion is just, you think it has nothing to do with you. You think it's just, this very simple thing. But she explains how just even the color blue that maybe is in the sweaters that we wear, how it has all of these layers of meaning, where it comes from this 2002 Oscar de la Renta collection. And then it filtered down to the other places, and it filtered down through department stores, and then it goes to the discount stores. And I think it's also important that when we talk about fashion, we also remember that like this is an industry. People have jobs in this industry. It is a huge moneymaker in the world, in our economies, in retail. And so there's so much work and there's so much thought that goes into clothing and the way that we dress before we even purchase these items. And then the way that we purchase these items and how we choose to wear them, we can add even more layers of meaning to that. And I think that's very clear in the choices that both Stroud and Complete Fiction made in the show and the books. They're really taking advantage of every bit of that meaning that they can kind of get out of these items.
Yeah. It's a masterclass, really, isn't it?
So with that said, we're going to dive in and start talking some specifics because we have a lot to talk about.
Because we're nerds and we love specifics.
But we're going to start talking about jewelry because I think that jewelry is the place where Stroud's use of clothing and dress as a symbol is the most obvious place throughout the series. And We see that in a number of places. So we're just kind of going to trace that throughout the books. And we're going to start with the screaming staircase, because that's where it really begins right away with Annabelle Ward, who, of course, is wearing a locket when Lucy and Lockwood find her corpse buried in the wall and, you know, all of that. But Lucy is immediately drawn to the locket and she takes it. And that kind of starts off this whole thread of jewelry and how its importance that continues throughout the entire series.
I mean, arguably, it also kicks off the plot of the entire series, because the connection with Annabelle kicks off Coombe Carey, and Coombe Carey kicks off everything else. So, yeah, it's a really powerful moment when she's just, you know, she's looking at Annabelle in the wall and she sees this little golden necklace and it's sparkling. It kind of calls to her, and, you know, so obviously she takes it, like you said, and it plays a really important part in the plot of the first book, in that it's, you know, it was a gift. Like, it's symbolism in that first book is just kind of, it's about love as possessiveness. So it's kind of like an early warning about, I suppose, we see in the screaming staircase Lockwood and Lucy beginning to dance around each other. We see the beginnings of their relationship, which, you know, it could be something great or it could be something destructive. So this first book like rings some alarm bells about the potential destructive nature of love, or when it becomes obsessive. It also, being the first book, it sets up so many things, but it also sets up this whole notion of costume, accessories, jewelry as an external image of our internal selves. So Lucy has this, when they're discussing the necklace, Lucy has this great line where she says, "You wear these things so you can have your loved one's message next to your heart." And I think this is not a throwaway line. This is a signpost in the text saying, pay attention to the jewelry, pay attention to the necklaces, pay attention to what people are wearing and what people are gifting each other and what that says about their relationships. So yeah, it's a great big neon sign in the first books. Like, this is something that's going to be important.
Yes, it's definitely Stroud signaling that it's important. And it also gives us a nice little insight into how Lucy feels about jewelry and how we see that, you know, it's important to her personally, which becomes then very important when we get to the Whispering Skull, because what happens in the Whispering Skull? Lockwood gives Lucy a necklace. He does this right before they go to the Fitz ball, and he is kind of dismissive about it, which is kind of funny. He's like very much trying to be casual about it, and he's like, "Oh, I just thought this might look good with your dress." And it's...
Was it casual when you gave me a silver necklace with a diamond pendant?
Was it? He says it's, you know, just something I had, but yeah, it's this beautiful silver necklace with a diamond pendant. And I don't know about you, I'm not casually giving diamonds to my friends, but, you know.
Where's George's casual diamond necklace? That's what I'd like to know.
A diamond bracelet. That's what I think George needs. He should have.
Yeah. Pair of cufflinks.
Oh,
maybe an ear stud.
I could get into that.
I think, yeah, he could pull it
Totally.
off. If anyone could, it's George.
Oh my gosh, that's a good rabbit hole for a future fanfic writer to go down. Please oblige us, someone out there listening to this. But
yeah,
to go back to the necklace that Lockwood gives Lucy, so it's never confirmed in the books, at least, where this necklace came from or what the background story of it is, but it's heavily implied, especially in the show when we see him going into Jessica's room, that the necklace belonged to her, which of course adds a whole nother layer of meaning to this necklace.
Yeah, it's in those first two books, there's this thread of Lockwood thinking of Lucy as like she reminds him of his sister. So in giving her his sister's necklace, it is a big declaration. It's a declaration, you're my family. So it's, you know, it is a big declaration of feeling from a not very expressive guy, but at the same time, it's maybe a bit of a line in the sand that, you know, I care about you very deeply, but I've kind of, maybe he's trying to put her in this little box of, oh, I think of you as a sister and it's safe and it's, you know, it's I'm recapturing something that I've lost in the past, and let's really not think about this any further, okay? It's definitely normal to just give your friends diamond necklaces that belong to your loved ones.
Yeah, it's very sister-like to, you know, give somebody a diamond necklace. It's all fine. Just shows how much I care. It's fine. Let's move on. And I mean, there is this nice little detail about how even, after the ball, they all change. This is in the books. They all change in the train station. And Lucy takes off her nice clothes, something that does not happen in the show.
That poor blue dress.
I know. I love that blue dress, though. So I don't blame them for keeping her in it. But she says she doesn't want to take off the necklace. Like, she can't bring herself to do it. She, loves it too much already, basically. And I think that's also just really telling. But I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole about the symbolism of diamonds. And it was really fun. Maybe that says something about me that I'm like, ooh, this is what's fun to spend my Thursday nights doing. But diamonds are, of course, we're all pretty familiar with diamonds, but diamonds pretty much have this, very classic symbolism of love and commitment. They're most commonly used in what? Engagement rings and, wedding rings. That says it all right there. But diamonds are also, if not the strongest, one of the strongest stones out there, and they're incredibly durable. I know that's one of the reasons why they're common for wedding rings, because you wear them every day and you want them to be able to hold up to that kind of wear and tear. But diamonds also have this symbolism associated with purity and clarity, and that kind of leads into this other symbolism that some people believe that diamonds, enhance spiritual enlightenment and provide clarity of thought and purpose with their ability to capture and reflect light. So they can even be a symbol of the divine. And especially when we talk about light, we have to always go back to what we know about the name Lucy.
Yes, because Lucy means, well, it's from the Latin word, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce correctly, but it's like lux, luce, lucia. All these words are variants on the Latin word for light. So it means lighter or light bringer. And the saint Lucy is also the patron saint of sight, and her feast day is celebrated on December 13th, which is one of the darkest days of the year. So this whole connotation of Lucy being someone who brings light and darkness is really, really cool as kind of a pairing for Lockwood, who is someone who arguably gets a bit lost in the dark.
And he gives her a jewel that kind of does the same thing. It brings light into the darkness. And I think that's really beautiful. And another thing I was reading about with diamonds, which is that in ancient time, diamonds were believed to protect against harm from evil spirits, which is interesting because later on in The Hollow Boy, Lucy's diamond necklace, not because of the diamond, but because of the silver, but it ends up saving them at Lavender Lodge when she uses it. She takes it off and waves it around and uses it to protect herself when she doesn't have these other, she doesn't have her rapier or any other, tools available to her. And that's kind of a nice little nod to the power of the diamond.
Yeah, I think a lot of the ghost hunting tools that they use are based on ancient traditions to do with things that represent purity. So salt was a disinfectant, so that was a symbol of purity, and silver. I'm not really sure why silver, but maybe because it was one of the earliest discovered elements, but silver also had this connotation of purity. So a lot of it makes sense to me that a diamond would have a similar connotation because it's all... Yeah, Stroud seems to have done a lot of research around what humans have thought of as signs of purity throughout history.
We see that throughout some of the other jewelry that we're going to talk about in a moment. But since we were just talking about the Hollow Boy and how the necklace continues to be important there.
Yeah, so I don't think the Hollow Boy sees the introduction of... Well, it doesn't see any gift giving of necklaces, but we definitely, at the start of the Hollow Boy, Lucy is still wearing the sister necklace, let's call it, arguably also the engagement necklace.
That's maybe the better way to say it.
But I do think that the Hollow Boy is a really transitional moment in their relationship, and that's kind of why they're struggling so much, is because they are having to face this. So they've been in this kind of safe space of, we're just friends who like each other an awful lot. But now their feelings for each other are growing to the extent that they can't really put it in that box anymore. So I think it is notable that is the book where they have to deal with a really epic poltergeist. Poltergeists often being associated with teen angst and teen discovery of romantic feelings for the first time. Let's say, it's very appropriate that The Hollow Boy should be the poltergeist book. But anyway, so she's wearing the sister necklace all the time. But there is maybe a hint that she discovers what people commonly call the necklace of undying devotion. So when she breaks into Jessica's room that time in The Hollow Boy, I say breaks into, it's not locked.
When she sneaks in.
She sneaks in.
It's still a secret.
Yeah, when she's rooting around in there, she does find a box containing a golden necklace with a dark green stone on a sheet of cotton batting, and she asks herself, his sister's? No. His mother's? And that's never resolved. And I know that the necklace that shows up in the empty grave has a blue stone, not a green stone. So I don't know if this is unintentional, or if it's just kind of a hint that maybe Celia has more jewellery lying around that we might see again, or if it's just that it was a dark room and she couldn't really tell what the colour was. But I do think it's notable that at this kind of moment of transition in their relationship, when she's kind of stepping outside that safe sister box, she encounters another necklace, which is his mother's, and kind of points to Lucy as kind of a partner for Lockwood, as opposed to like a sister, a partner in a safer sense. Safer but less intimate.
It's a really interesting moment, especially how that they're using jewelry in that book. There's really not much jewelry talk, however, in The Creeping Shadow. I went through pretty much all the ebooks of all the books in search for bracelet, necklace, to see what came up, and there was like nothing in that book. And notably, we never quite learn what happens to the sister necklace after the Hollow Boy. It's never mentioned again. So it has spawned many fanon theories that we will not go into today, because we have more necklaces to talk about, and we have more other jewelry to talk about in general. But before we get into further discussion of the wife necklace, as I also think of the necklace from the empty grave, I want to talk a little bit about the other important piece of jewelry in that book, which is Ezekiel's source, which is, of course, a bracelet of green stones. So we see a big contrast in the empty grave between Ezekiel's source and the necklace that Lockwood gives to Lucy at the very end of the series. And that really reflects back to this pattern, this spectrum that was established all the way at the beginning of the series with Annabelle Ward's necklace and Jessica's necklace. We're seeing the two sides of love and attachment. One side that's, devoted and very pure and very meaningful and healthy. And we also see this other side of an attachment that becomes obsessive and harmful to both the people involved and the people around them. And that is the power of love to become this obsessive, harmful thing is never more clear than it is in Ezekiel and his source and the way Marissa's attached to him. And so I had to do a little bit more research here, of course, about Ezekiel's source. So it's first just described as a bracelet of green stones. Later on, it's mentioned that it's jade. So jade is commonly known as the stone of heaven, and it has had a lot of different symbols through the years. But it is frequently considered to be a symbol of good fortune and abundance, and it's been used in lots of jewelry to attract positive energy. It's also very hard and durable, similar to diamonds, but it is very much associated with the soul and immortality, to the extent that it was frequently used in rituals associated with the dead. Resurrection. It's also associated with offerings to evil spirits, or to protect yourself rather from evil spirits. So you're making this offering so that you get protection. Which, is there a more evil spirit in these books than Ezekiel?
Wouldn't say so.
I wouldn't say so either. And the other kind of curious thing when I was doing this searching throughout the books, the only other character in the empty grave that is described as wearing bracelets is La Belle Dame, which is interesting. And she's literally described as being festooned with bracelets. So she's just covered with jewelry, basically.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say that's an accident, because I really think that La Belle Dame is meant to be there as like a kind of a mirror of Marissa. Like, she's very often the hauntings in that the book starts with are like kind of, they set something up, they play out, they're a microcosm of a larger story of like what's playing out throughout the greater arc. So the fact that you have this ghost who's obsessed with her appearance and who uses her physical beauty to kind of suck people in and sort of, I don't know, she seems to almost suck the life out of people. That really seems to reflect how Marissa has behaved and what her aims and goals were. So yeah, and an obsession with your appearance to the point of disorder is like, even though like being into your appearance is quite normal, or, it's not something that's treated as bad, like being obsessed with it to the point that Marissa is, is definitely a bad thing. It's part of her motivations for doing what she does, because she's so obsessed with like maintaining her youthfulness that she actually runs away from death. So yeah, I don't think it's an accident that La Belle Dame is sort of decked out the way Marissa is.
Yeah, it's a really interesting kind of parallel to have that, you know, those two examples in The Empty Grave. And then, of course, we go to, you know, the scenes where the necklace features. And the first one is, of course, right before Portland Row is attacked. Lucy and Lockwood are in the back garden. And this is how Lucy describes the necklace. A golden necklace, and its pendant was a shimmering blue stone, smooth and oval and darkly translucent. It was like looking into deep, fresh, clean water. And then later on, this is basically in the final chapter of the book, after Lockwood has left the necklace for Lucy on her bed in the midst of all the paperwork. And she says, even in the dusk, the gem was glorious, undying and undimmed. It was as if all the light and love it had gathered in the past was shining out on me. And that just, that last sentence just gets me every time. Like,
it's
right
gorgeous.
Just like, losing it over here. But it's such a beautiful scene. Those scenes are both just so beautiful. And the way Lucy describes the necklace is so beautiful because it shows these, you know, this evolution of their relationship. And once again, we can see some symbolism in that sapphire. Sapphires are symbols of truth, sincerity, and faithfulness. I mean, hello, Lockwood calls it the necklace. He doesn't call it the necklace of undying devotion, but he says straight out that that's what it's supposed to symbolize.
Yeah, that it was what it represented for his parents. So he's very obviously like handing that on to Lucy, and it isn't an accident that, you know, he gave her one necklace that, you know, kind of represented youth and innocent. Like, I mean, I think silver, diamond, like the whiteness, the purity, like those are things that have a connotation of like kind of youthful innocence. Whereas gold kind of feels more mature, like, you know, just it feels like a progression. You go from a silver wedding anniversary to a gold wedding anniversary. And like, to me, anyway, I don't know if this is a thing in other countries, but I feel like it's common for engagement rings to be silver, while gold bands are then traditional for weddings. So there's a definite sense that in transitioning from the one to the other, they've gone from a kind of a tentative youthful crush to a more mature adult love.
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful movement from one to another. So that was jewelry and the symbolism behind all those choices, which clearly we had a lot to say about all of those things. But Stroud also uses clothing and attire to flesh out his characters and reveal important aspects of their personalities as well.
Yeah, so like, for example, we learn really early on that Lockwood Co is the only agency in London without a uniform. And this is like, I mean, it kind of does double duty, because on the one hand, this allows Stroud to show more personality of his main characters through their clothing choices, but also in itself, it's like a reflection of their independent status. So they're not conforming to any mold, they're independents, they're mavericks. And yeah, it's a statement on two levels.
Yeah, and that additional freedom really gives Stroud a lot of leeway for us to learn more about all the characters. Most of the main characters in the books and in the show have kind of what we think of as their signature items of clothing. And if we're going to start talking about signature items of clothing, there's no other place for us to start than talking about Lockwood, who has a very distinct style.
Yes, like one of the first things we learn about him is that he wears suits pretty much every day. We know he doesn't even own a pair of jeans, but we do know that he has plenty of jumpers.
Yes, there's a great little detail in The Empty Grave when Flo is staying to help nurse George back to health, where she sleeps on a pile of Lockwood's jumpers, which implies that he has quite a few of them.
Yeah, at least 5, I would say.
At least 5 is what we've decided. But all of these suits bring up several questions. So where did they come from? How many does he go through in a month? Ghost hunting has to be rough on a suit. I mean, these are not like garments known for their intense durability. So then how does he afford all of these suits? Because they're expensive. And we know it, at least early on in the series, he doesn't have a lot of money to spare. And finally, why are they so tight? Because that is the number one thing we learn about the fit of his clothes, is they are pretty much always slightly too tight. And so I have seen many theories about all of this. Many people tend to think that they belong to Lockwood's father, Donald. However, I don't personally think that theory holds up, because then presumably if they once belonged to an adult man who's larger than teenage Lockwood, or at least the same size, that doesn't make sense that they would be so tight.
Unless his dad is like really, really skinny.
I mean, but Lockwood's already really skinny. And the like one time we hear a picture of him described, it sounds like, I think he's described as a tall, thin man. So like,
it's
that doesn't work. It doesn't work.
No.
I've also heard that they're tight because Lockwood is still growing and can't afford to replace them, which is, I think, a good theory. However, at the beginning of The Creeping Shadow, when Lockwood comes to Lucy's flat to try and persuade her to work the case with them, you know, just my all-time favorite scene of the entire series.
It's great.
Lucy mentions that he's wearing a new suit and it's still too tight. So that really does imply that Lockwood wears his suits tight because he likes them that way. He must think he looks good. And I just kind of love that hint that he is just a little bit, more than a little bit vain about his appearance.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that he's a little bit of a peacock. I mean, I do think there's like, there are practical sides to the suits. Like, on the one hand, it's like a signal that he's a professional man and he wants to be taken seriously as a business owner, and suits are just kind of the shorthand for hello, I am a serious professional person. And especially when he's young, he kind of needs that, like, that extra help. I mean, I think actually it's one of the first things that Lucy notices about him when she comes in for her interview. She says, like, he's a tall boy in a suit, and then it takes her a minute to realize, oh, actually he's my age.
Yes,
because he projects this air of confidence so effectively. So I mean, it is something of a performance. Like, wearing the suits all the time is definitely a little bit it's definitely a bit of an act, but I think at the same time, he likes dressing up, he likes fashion. I think maybe when he's older, he might expand his wardrobe a bit, like when he's not feeling quite so under pressure to try and make an impact on people and force them to take him seriously. But, I do think at the same time, it's just one of his interests. And I also think it's a very teen thing to, like, try and be expressing yourself through your fashion choices. Like, it's the time when you do lots of experimentation, you do lots of extreme things, like wearing a three-piece suit all the time.
Yeah.
But I do think that as he would get older, I can see him being a little bit more of a jumper and khakis type of guy.
That's 100% my headcanon for adult Lockwood. But I mean, we also see his interest in that his interest in clothing is beyond just, a thing he does to look professional. Like Mairead was saying, I think it's something he legitimately finds fun and interesting. And I think we also see this through, perhaps, again, my favorite detail in the entire series. So my favorite scene is when he visits Lucy's flat. But my favorite detail is like kind of this like little throwaway bit that's mentioned in the final chapter of The Empty Grave, which is that Lockwood has a style profile in the Times of London. And
I think that was just fan service personally for you, specifically for you, Meg.
I died the first time I read it. I've been obsessed with it ever since. And I personally think, and I think Mairead agrees with me, that this really foreshadows his destiny of becoming a model post The Empty Grave. Like, This is his post-canon career. Yeah.
I think we, again, to be promising new episodes, I think we are at some point going to do kind of a what might they do in the future type of speculation episode. But Meg and I will both be arguing for Lockwood as Britain's next top model.
He has the charisma. He's got the interest.
He's got the range.
He's got it. He's got it. He's got the flair for the dramatics. Yeah. It's the perfect career for him.
Yeah. Supermodel and then prime minister.
Exactly. There's a lot in common between those two things in many ways.
Yes. But I mean, it is also a very important aspect to his character, but it's not the only one.
No. There is another item of clothing that is arguably even more important, and that means it's time, Mairead, for us to talk about the coat.
The coat!
The coat, which is the main reason why I think we both wanted to do this episode to begin with.
I was like, I'm not going to have any thoughts at all about fashion, really, Meg. I'm just going to sit here and like kind of listen to you. And then I went away and I wrote like an essay on the coat. So yeah, I want to talk about the coat.
Let's go. So obviously all the jewelry is really symbolic. But the coat is, I would argue, the most symbolic item of clothing. Mm. And this is another thing where there's a lot of fanon theories about where did Lockwood's coat come from. And this is something where I do think it was perhaps his father's or another family member's. I very much can see him pulling it out of a closet at Portland Row and like putting it on. And I think the coat has a lot of symbolism. If we
you
think
can
about
read it in
that
so
way.
many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to read it, but I think we've talked a lot in the Lockwood episodes that we've done about how part of Lockwood's arc as a character and part of what is important to him is his attachment to his past. And he also has this deep commitment to continuing his family legacy. That's really, really important to him. And I think if we think of the coat as something that potentially did once belong to a family member, it's, you know, very much a nice little physical embodiment of that idea, because he's pretty much never without it.
Yeah, I think like I said, there's so many ways to read it. I don't think it's intended to be read as like just one thing. One, to me, like my very earliest reading of it was that it's kind of a symbol of his ego, like his commitment to like looking a certain way, and you know, his vanity. It kind of gets in his way sometimes. Like we see, especially in the Screaming Staircase, you know, there's this moment in the Hope House when he can't pull his sword clear of his coat to protect himself from the ghost, and that's why Lucy throws the flare that starts the fire and causes all the trouble. And it's actually just because the coat's too big for him. And George says that too, like when later on in the book, he gets the coat caught in a gooseberry bush, which must have done absolute wreck to the coat, because I don't know if you've ever seen the thorns on a gooseberry bush, but they're like half an inch long. You'd get some dock off those. Like, anyway, George does call him on it. It's funny to see that Lucy doesn't. She doesn't make fun of him for nearly getting himself killed with the coat, but George calls him on it. He says, "It's too long. It almost killed you the other night." So yeah, I think there is a way that you can see it as kind of Lockwood's like aspirations and his big dreams like tripping him up. And it is like, I think it's quite sweet that Lucy never makes fun of him for that. Like in that first scene, that first sequence in the Hope House, she's clearly like quite externally impatient with Lockwood, like, oh, you know, don't imitate any accents, don't provoke the ghost. Like, she's giving out to him a lot. But then when he actually does something wrong, like he has this coat that he kind of wears as an affectation, and it nearly gets them killed, and she doesn't make fun of it for him at all, because she likes the way he dresses. She wants to believe in the image that he projects. I think she really actually needs it. But yeah, there is also something to be said for the fact that he doesn't trip over it in future books. So I think there's like kind of like a double like metaphor there. Like, you know, on the one hand, he's grown physically. It seems to imply he has a bit of a growth spurt between the between the Screaming Staircase and the Whispering Skull. He seems to get taller, but also there's kind of a sense of him growing into his potential as a leader as he grows into the coat. So that's one of the things that it can mean. But also I think he just likes it.
Oh, he loves the coat. He loves the coat. And I think part of it is he thinks he looks cool in the coat. And, you know, we talked about what all the coat went through. One thing that's referred to multiple times throughout the series is during the case with Miss Barrett's tomb, he like gets claw marks on it, right? Somehow, I think it's claw marks. And he never gets it repaired because he knows it looks cool.
Well, I think he does get it repaired, actually. Like, he gets the claw marks sewn up, but he doesn't get a new coat.
He doesn't get a new coat. You can still tell. You
Yeah.
can still tell it's there. And, I mean, Lucy has a similar jacket that we see later in the series that she has a ghost handprint on it. And she also...
So cool.
She never replaces that either, because they both know that they look cool when they have these items on.
His and hers. It's very cute.
His and hers coats. His and her ghost coats.
Yeah. But I mean, Stroud does so much with it. There's like a load of imagery associated with it that's to do with like birds or wings. There's, I think, in the Screaming Staircase, I always want to say the Screaming Shadow, there's this moment, you know, when after the explosion at Coombe Carey, Lockwood is described as kind of like lying crumpled on his side with his coat stretched out behind him like a broken wing. So there's kind of this flavor of like wings of death, angel of death about it. And I think it's also pretty interesting to me that it's described as a greatcoat. It's not an overcoat, it's a greatcoat. And that's traditionally part of a military uniform, and particularly for World War II British soldiers. Like, if you say the word greatcoat to me, my mind jumps straight away to the trenches and dulce decorum est and Siegfried Sassoon and all the rest of it. So yeah, again, I imagine that must be deliberate. Like, he's, to me in a way, Lockwood is so much kind of like the best of that old money public schoolboy archetype. It just makes sense to dress him in the uniform of those kids who went off to war, and it also adds to kind of the sense of tragedy and like doom hanging over his head. So it's a fantastic choice.
Yeah, it's really, really well thought. I mean, there are so many layers of meaning beyond just the way that it's used as a symbol, but also just in the historical significance of the coat. But another symbol of the coat that really gets me is perhaps one of the most notable moments in The Hollow Boys at the end, when Lockwood has found Lucy under Eichmere's, I always say it differently.
Who knows?
Eichmere's, however we want to say it. He finds her. Okay. You can just run through the gamut of pronunciations.
All the vowel sounds.
All the vowel sounds. And Lucy, it comes right after the very important moment where Lockwood says, "Come off it. You know I'd die for you." And then he's like, "Oh no, Lucy, you're shaking. You must be," and he's basically like, "You must be cold. Come on, put on my coat." And he takes off his coat and he puts it on her. And it's just like, it's the physical embodiment of what he's doing emotionally. He's shedding this layer of his armor just as he's opening up to her. He's being so vulnerable with her. A lot of it really for the first time. Later on in the scene was where he talks to her about Jessica. He mentions his parents. They kind of hash out some of their differences during the Hollow Boy. It's what she's been waiting for the entire book. But he doesn't do any of it until he takes off the coat.
Yeah, that's a great, like, the way he uses the coat to interact with other people. That's a really great point. Like, and also there's the demise of the coat. He cuts it up to save Kip's in the empty grave. So, and it's so amazing to me that it's Kip's in particular that he cuts it up for, because it's, you know, it's his ego, like the symbol of his ego, and he cuts strips out of it to bandage his rival. Like, it's such a beautiful moment. Like, I can't read that whole moment with Quill nearly dying without, like, I don't know, trying to bite my book or something. But, you know, it's you know, there's so many layers of meaning to that moment. You know, he's sacrificing his ego, his attachment to death, his attachment to the past, and arguably his ego is kind of like bound up in all those things, like, because it takes a lot of humility to move on and to accept life with its imperfections. So it's just the fact that he ends the books like having cut up this old coat and put on a new one. It's just great symbolism for a new start. It makes me insane. I can't think about it too hard, or I'll have to be sent to the seaside for my health.
And I mean, yes, he's wearing the new coat when he brings Lucy the necklace and he gives it to her. I mean, it's just, it's all the fresh starts, it's all the new beginnings, just wrapped up into one package. It's so good, Stroud. It's so good.
We're in your walls.
We're not normal about this, clearly.
Yeah, because having, you know, 14 or so episodes of a podcast before this, everyone thought we were normal about it. But
oh my god,
the truth's out now.
The truth is totally out. Okay, we could talk about the coat, I think, for forever, but we're gonna move on to talking about some similar elements in some of the other characters in the books. And so those are Lucy and Holly. While they're very different characters and very different people, we really see the same kind of aspect of performance and how they both dress. But instead of performing the way that Lockwood is, maybe where he's trying to look like a businessman and trying to, you know, sell himself as someone professional and competent, they both have a very, the way that they dress is really reflective on their relationship with femininity. So Lucy in the books, her wardrobe is different in the show, I think, for a variety of reasons. But in the books, she's pretty much always described as wearing a short, flared skirt, A-line skirt, over leggings. This is the outfit she wears almost every day, including on jobs. Usually she's wearing like a long sleeve t-shirt or a jumper over that, or some layers, probably because it's cold. And we've both seen some criticism of this outfit as perhaps being impractical, maybe even a bit sexist, to write an active girl constantly wearing skirts. But I think we both strongly disagree with that assertion on many levels. I think this outfit is actually quite practical. A short A-line skirt over thick leggings is super comfortable, especially if you're talking about an elastic waist skirt, which is what I've always imagined.
Yeah.
She's not wearing like a tight little mini skirt. It's like a flowing kind of loose skirt. And so that allows for a lot of a movement. It's far less likely to get tangled or caught on things than Lockwood's huge greatcoat that's like streaming along after him and getting tangled in bushes and everything. And I think just because Lucy's wearing a skirt, I think we have this connotation that feminine clothing, people think you can't be physically active in it, but that's just not true. And I think Mairead and I were talking earlier about how we both see that in our own lives. Like many times wearing a skirt can be more practical than wearing pants. If you're wearing jeans that aren't stretchy, those things are hard to move in.
Yeah. Like getting pants with decent stretch that don't like pull you anywhere can be tough. Like particularly, I mean, Lucy is described as a hippie girl. Like, you know, she's probably got a bit of an hourglass. Like if you have an hourglass, to be honest, finding jeans that fit you is really tricky because you need like, you know, a wide waist and then narrow legs, and it's just so actually finding skirts and leggings that fit you much easier. Much easier. So I don't know if Stroud was thinking about all that, but he certainly got it made the right call in terms of comfort.
Yeah, and I mean, this is an outfit, like the first book, The Screaming Staircase, was published in 2013, and I will tell you, in 2013, and especially the few years before that, like the early 2010s, I was wearing a variation of this outfit all the time. It's just also a style that was very popular at the moment.
It's just a very practical outfit.
So,
I mean, I do think like there's other levels of Lucy's outfit as well. So, you know, it's a bit reminiscent of a school uniform. Sometimes, you know, like the skirt and the jumper, it is a bit reminiscent of the way that British schoolgirls dress. But it's also, I mean, I think in terms of dress, she's actually the most conservative one out of Lockwood Co. She's the one who really cares about looking like an agent. So she wears this outfit as kind of her own like personal agent uniform. And she repeats this a lot. Like, you know, she says, you know, like I got dressed, I looked at myself, I looked like an agent. So, I mean, it's funny because it's actually quite a feminine outfit, but she downplays how feminine the outfit is in favor of professionalism. So this is something that we discussed, I think, as well when we were doing our Lucy episode. Like, yeah, like she tends to hide behind the whole agent thing. Like she makes it her whole identity, and she does that in her clothing as well. Like I think she kind of feels that, even though she would probably disagree if asked, like her femininity is really important to her, but she does feel like she's not entitled to be feminine, is the impression I get. So she kind of hides behind this armor of an agent. So like, you know, I get the impression from the way she describes herself that she's probably a plus size girl, or at least mid-size. She's maybe not conventionally attractive, or she doesn't see herself as that. So however she actually looks, what we can be sure of is that she has self-esteem issues connected to her appearance. And she's working in a very physical job where her strength is an advantage. Remember when Holly says she's burly?
I forgot about that.
Calls out Holly.
That's low.
Yeah. So it is, yeah, I mean, it is, to be honest, I don't think Holly meant anything by that. She's just panicking in the moment. But it is just an example of one of the ways that Holly just pushes all her buttons, because it's already hard for her to feel feminine. And she definitely feels threatened by people who she thinks like fit into femininity better than her. Like, you know, thinner, prettier, better dressed. And it's not just Holly, like Kate or Kat Godwin in The Whispering Skull is described as, you know, being thin and pretty and blonde and wearing a skirt, and Lucy definitely resents her for that. But I think in light of all that, it's all the more significant that she chooses to go round in a skirt and leggings. Like there is a little bit of a kind of a, I am a girl actually, and I want to be perceived as such, even though maybe she feels she isn't perceived as such. So all the more reason to get, I don't know, aggressive about it.
And I mean, all of these complicated feelings that Lucy has about her appearance and the way that she dresses, they all feed into the conflict that very quickly arises when Holly shows up. Because Holly looks much girlier, and she looks much more traditionally feminine than Lucy, at least as Lucy perceives her. Holly's signature item of clothing is a pinafore dress. Lucy describes her as slim. She raves about how beautiful her hair and her skin are all the time. And she's very much a picture of conventional femininity. And she is also much neater in her appearance. Like Lucy sometimes is like, when was the last time I brushed my hair? Maybe it's been a while.
Mood.
But Holly is, constantly putting way more effort into her appearance than Lucy ever does. And this is just one of the many factors that creates tension between the two of them.
Yeah, like, I mean, I get the impression that Holly really performs her femininity. Like, it seems like armor to Holly that she's been... Yeah, I mean, we'll do a Holly ep at some stage and we'll talk about, like, her bad experiences before, but I really get the impression that she uses that, like, beauty and perfection to keep people out. So she kind of really leans into it as, like, as an armor. But Lucy, again, in a sort of self-protective way, downplays her femininity and downplays, like, I don't know, the validity, the importance of it. And I really get the impression that it comes to a sense that this image of femininity comes from a feeling that she in some way doesn't have the right to it. And I'm not projecting here at all. But,
Neither of us are.
No, we're completely emotionally distant and objective as regards this topic. But I think, like, whenever we're talking about Lucy and appearance, it always comes back to that line that she quotes her mother as saying, prettiness isn't your profession. So, I mean, gosh, the things our parents say to us about our appearance, like, no matter how loving the parent, they stick with us forever. And that wasn't a particularly loving parent. So,
no.
I think it must have been a really formative moment for Lucy, and it says so much that Lucy makes her appearance and her identity about being an agent. And she seems to almost have this feeling that it's mutually exclusive, being an agent and being, like, feminine and attractive. So she feels like she has this either or choice. She can't do both, which is a really limited perspective on femininity. She's been taught this kind of horrible false dichotomy where looking feminine and, like, being pretty are equated with being useless. So she kind of comforts herself for not having this prettiness because at least I'm useful. So when someone else comes along and they're useful and pretty, then, oh my God, is she threatened? And again, girl, mood.
Definite mood.
Yeah.
This is another topic I think we'll dive into a little bit more, as Mairead mentioned, when we do an episode about Holly, which I am excited for. But we do have other characters to also address right now. And who else could we start with but George?
I mean, it feels, maybe, I feel like George would object to being brought up in the fashion episode. But
he 100% would, but that's why it's important to talk about it.
Yes, because not caring about your appearance is also a choice as regards your appearance, particularly when you must have the money to be able to care about your wardrobe. Like, if Lockwood has enough money to afford suits, then presumably he's surely paying George enough that he doesn't have to wear his horrible shapeless puffer jackets and his saggy jeans. So it definitely tells us that appearances aren't a priority for George. And actually the Skull says this in The Empty Grave. He says that, haven't you noticed that, like, Cubbins is the only one among you who doesn't care about appearances? And the whole question of appearances and mirrors and, the kind of snap judgments versus what's inside mattering, it's just such a strong theme in these books. I do also think, like, it's another aspect maybe of George as neurodivergent, that he doesn't, like, care about his appearance. Not that, like, it's necessarily a trait that every single neurodivergent person has, but, like, it is maybe more common for autistic people to see the performance of, like, how you dress as shallow, and to go, like, well, why should I care what I look like? Because that seems to be very much George's attitude. Like, what does it matter? It's what's on the inside that matters. It's the intellect, it's the knowledge, it's the pursuit of truth. And, it's kind of value neutral. It's not a good choice or a bad choice. It is worth noting that it does put people off him, the way he looks. And, like, I think he kind of leans into that a little bit. I think he enjoys winding people up.
Yeah, he does.
He really hates that kind of skin-deep shallowness so much that he deliberately sets out to annoy people who are making those snap judgments based on appearance, which I think is a really funny thing for him to do. And I like that he does it. It's just very, very in character. He just enjoys rubbing people up the wrong way. And yeah, it's great. We love a little bit of conflict.
And I mean, there's no one whose wardrobe I think George likes to criticize more than Kip's.
Who doesn't love to criticize Kip's?
Who doesn't?
It's like our fandom sport. It's just beating on him.
And I mean, he's so easy to in some ways. But because, I mean, early in the series, he is, more than any other agent, he is associated with his Fitz uniform and with his gaudy rapier and just how pretentious he is overall and how he's got this kind of very like new money kind of feeling with this flashy rapier.
Yeah, the paste jewels.
Yeah, it's definitely not something.
The kid gloves. It's all too much.
It's so much. And that's the thing Lucy frequently comments on about Kip's. And her narration about his wardrobe is just that it's all so much. It's all over the top, basically.
Yeah.
But then, as soon as Kip's leaves Fitz in The Creeping Shadow, we see a total evolution in his wardrobe. All of a sudden, he just shows up and Lucy says, today he wore black jeans, a turtleneck, and a black zip-up jacket. So basically, head to toe black. She says the jeans were a trifle tight and the boots a trifle pointy, but it was fairly sensible attire. But the fact that he chooses a black turtleneck and he continues to wear a black turtleneck basically throughout the rest of the series.
King behavior.
That is also an item of clothing that has a lot of history and significance. So black turtlenecks, I really think, are very much an homage to the beatniks, the beat poets of the 50s. And they were first very strongly associated with that group of people, but then they've pretty much been associated with nonconformists ever since. So pretty much in the 50s, they were wearing lots of black and skinny pants, and that kind of has continued onward. That's also kind of the John Lennon look. But I think Kip's is very much going back to this like artsy, pretentious kind of look with his choice of attire. I mean, George even makes that connection. He says, art critic, train buff, with that turtleneck, you could be almost anything. Like, he's signaling these kind of like pretentious ideas, even with that little quote. So we love to see it.
I think as well, there's something about the whole kind of nonconformist vibe, like of his new outfit, which is very much like, oh, I'm a rebel. I'm not part of Fitz anymore. I'm striking out. I'm being my own man. I bet he like starts growing a little mustache as well. I would love to see that.
A goatee.
A goatee, absolutely. A horrible little ginger goatee.
And then he's hanging out in like coffee shops and going to poetry readings and in his spare time.
Smoking horrible little rollies.
Oh, yeah. That's our other, maybe. That's Mairead's favorite Kip's headcanon.
It's not a headcanon, it's canon. He smokes. It's just too funny, I'm sorry.
No, it definitely, in his turtleneck.
Yeah.
So that's just a few of the kind of signature wardrobe items that are important in the books, but many of them are so important that they also make their way into the show. And we have a lot of similarities in the show, of course, like George's puffy jacket is there, Lockwood's coat, and his like love of suits is there as well. But there are some changes that we think are notable and worth discussing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, is to do with, like, the slightly different timeline. So it's bumped by, like, 10 or 20 years, I think. So, instead of Gale showing up looking like, I don't know, how they describe, like, the wizards trying to pass as muggles in Harry Potter? Like, they're wearing, like, the really loud suits and stuff and the really weird colours.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what Rupert Gale's style sounds like in the books. Whereas in the show, they gave him eyeliner and a man bun. And I just want to say, whatever costuming genius thought of that, there is a hug waiting for you in Cork. Come to Cork, I will buy you a pint. It'll be really great.
And then come to the US and I will also thank you. I'll bake you cookies and be like, yes, great job.
Oh, we're leaning into our cultural stereotypes there, aren't we? I don't even really drink. But yeah, and I mean then like there are some changes, like for Lockwood, instead of wearing dress shoes or work boots, we see him in like kind of Converse style sneakers and colorful socks. So I think it like it's a little bit more teenagery than the full businessman style, and it gives him a bit of a less conformist edge, a little bit more of a rebel.
Yeah. Definitely. And so I did a little bit of research, just a little, maybe like a half hour to an hour worth of research about another item of Lockwood's wardrobe in the show. And that is his ties, which are knit ties, which are usually they're like woven ties, usually they can be made out of silk or out of wool, but they're textured and they're squared off at the bottom. And these are the kind of ties. I found this great quote where somebody described him as the rebellious younger brother of the tie world, and that they were maverick, unorthodox, and spirited, which I just thought was
perfect for show Lockwood.
This is from Catherine Hayward, who's the fashion director of Esquire UK.
There we go.
These kind of ties also have a lot of history. So they first became popular in the 1920s, commonly worn by none other than F. Scott Fitzgerald.
I feel like Lockwood would enjoy that.
I know, I love that. And then in the post-war years, they became really popular because there were silk shortages. So they were cheaper and more durable. They were initially really seen as something that working class people wore because it was cheaper, again, than silk. But then they became something that were also worn by like Ivy League college men in the 40s and 50s. And they weren't really thought of as formal until the 60s, when one James Bond was described as wearing them in both the early books and movies. And we kind of have talked a little bit, maybe not on this episode, but in general, about how there's a little bit of an association of Lockwood's fashion sense with the mods of the 60s. And there we also see this connection there with the ties, because the Beatles were also very famous for wearing knit ties in the early 60s. They were very much seen as an early kind of mods fashion choice. So there's actually a lot that goes into choosing to put Lockwood in these ties versus a more traditional silk tie.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Miranda Priestley quote again. Like I would never have thought that hard about it. Just kind of, oh, why is he wearing that funny looking tie? But actually there is so much significance to it. It's really impressive. But yeah. As regards Lucy, she loses her skirts. We see her in these little kind of, what would you call it? Like a little romper suit, like a play suit.
Yeah, romper, play suit. I think they have another name that I can't remember at the moment.
Yeah.
But we see her in those quite frequently.
Yeah, and these kind of, I don't know, they look almost like work pants. Like they're definitely not jeans.
Like utility
pants, yeah.
But she does wear jeans.
She does wear jeans as well, yeah.
She wears far more pants.
Yeah. Which, I mean, there's a lot of possible reasons for that. I mean, one reason is that maybe it's easier for the actress to avoid wardrobe malfunctions if she's not wearing a flippy little skirt. But also, I think, again, probably, you know, the skirt and leggings are very 2010s.
Yeah.
Whereas the clothes that Ruby Stokes wore in the show, you know, you could wear those out in the street like today. You know, I think they're very up to date. They're very contemporary. So it was maybe a choice to try and make her look a little bit more like the teens of today. Another person who underwent a big change was Barnes, because he was supposed to be like a 50-year-old white guy with a mustache and a rain jacket, and instead he's like in his 30s and very attractive and in a leather jacket and very cool. So, but the funny thing is like that Barnes was supposed to end up with a leather jacket by the end. Like he gets his leather jacket from a biker in The Empty Grave. So kind of Natasha had this hilarious theory that he was going to reverse as the show progressed, that he's going to grow a mustache and start wearing an anorak.
Hey, it could happen. He's going to grow older.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of funny because the leather jacket at the end of The Empty Grave is him really like shedding this like conventionalness, and really it's his maverick moment coming out. And he's just got it right away at the beginning of the show, which I love.
Yeah. No, I loved everything they did with Show Barnes. No, 10 out of 10, no notes. But another big change actually in the show was the rings. So Annabelle Ward's necklace in the books becomes a ring in the show. Also, Lockwood gets a signet ring, which I think everyone has been a little bit obsessed with.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
100 out of 10.
100 out of 10.
Great costume choice.
Yeah, we all love it. And I don't know, I think everyone kind of assumes that it was his father's ring, but there's absolutely no like basis of fact in that.
It's never said.
It's never said, but it does, I mean, it's a signet ring, and those are usually family heirlooms, aren't they? So
yes.
it does make a lot of sense to assume that ring might have belonged to his father, and that he would wear it as like a little act of like filial devotion. Gonna make myself cry, but yeah, I mean,
no,
I do no crying until the episode's over.
No crying out loud.
I do think that it kind of makes you wonder whether the would something have happened to the necklace of Undying Devotion as well? Like Lucy still gets a necklace, though the sister necklace is still the sister necklace. So I'm a little bit curious as to what might have happened with the rings and the rings versus necklaces thing. I'd be very interested to oh man, the next if they do another of those meetups, I hope they can like rope in one of the costuming people, because I would listen to one of them for hours and hours and hours. I would love to get into their heads for a bit.
I would come to London for that, without a doubt. Please
there you go. But yeah, I don't know whether maybe some of the stuff was because it was easier to show on screen. Like it seems like maybe Ezekiel's source was going to be a necklace as opposed to a bracelet, because apparently I never noticed this until I think Lizzie pointed out to me, but Penelope is always wearing the same necklace, so probably that's meant to be the source. And maybe it's just something that's a little bit less noticeable. I think, to me, if someone wears a bracelet all the time, I would find that odder than having kind of like your comfort necklace. Like, having a comfort necklace is more common than having a comfort bracelet to me.
And there is a scene, it might be when she's talking to Lucy at the ball, at the gala.
Mm-hmm.
I always call it a ball, but it's not really a ball. Maybe even when she says the line about how she's a great listener, I think she touches the necklace. And I think that is, I could be wrong. I haven't watched that scene in a long time.
I have the sense memory, like the image in my head to back you up, if that counts for anything.
It does. Thank you. And I think I think it's easier to show on a screen, like somebody fiddling with a necklace versus fiddling with a bracelet. So, and I think it is, I mean, if they were going to continue doing something with the necklace symbolism, I think there's an interesting way to tie that all together if Ezekiel's source also becomes a necklace.
Yeah. It was an interesting choice. Wish we could have seen more of it.
I know.
Anyway,
I know.
Let's not dwell on that.
No, because I think we've actually talked about all this quite a bit already. And we can really see throughout these books and the show just how important the way that characters dress and present themselves really is. We talked a lot about this in the books versus show episode, but particularly in the show, you can use all these little visual cues as a form of messaging to the audience. And it's really proof that, no detail is wasted. Every bit about the way that someone dresses and their accessories, their jewelry, it tells us something about who they are as people. And it shows us, that none of these things are an accident, and they continue to build layers and layers of meaning as we learn more and dive further and deeper into these ideas.
Yeah, and I think on another level as well, there's this thread that runs through the series about, like, the whole question of appearance and, like, what it means to care about your appearance, like how much you should value it. So, like, on the one hand, we have Marissa, who is obsessed with her appearance. Like, there's that moment in The Empty Grave when Lucy goes up to her penthouse and she's like, there are, wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling mirrors around here. She is so vain. Like, that vanity, when you make your appearance your only value, that leads us to materialism and that kind of fear of death, which is what motivates Marissa. But then on the other hand, like, there's a real theme about these snap judgments that Lucy makes based on appearances. So she keeps judging people. Like, she judges George for not caring enough, and she judges Holly for caring too much, and she judges Kipps for, like, well, I suppose him for caring too much as well, but she judges Holly because she cares too much and she gets it right. Like, she pulls off the look, and she judges Kipps because he cares too much, and according to her, he doesn't pull off the look, even though it's kind of like the same look that Lockwood has in a lot of ways, like, the tightness and the flashiness.
A little bit over the top, but in a different sort of way.
It's hard to judge Kipps for a paste, like, jeweled rapier when Lockwood's going around with a purple pinstripe suit.
That's
it is a choice. It is a choice. It's very much peacocking. But so she kind of makes these snap judgments on both extremes, like people who don't care at all and people who care too much. And I think there's the real message there is that it's important to find that balance between caring too much and not caring at all. Like, to use the way that you present yourself to express respect for others and, like, your own identity. So I think it's a very interesting perspective, particularly in our very appearance-focused world.
It really is. And we see Lucy go on such a journey with her own performance and her own understanding of her identity. And this is very much paralleled in what she says about her own appearance. I always think about the moment at the end of The Empty Grave. She's going up to fight Marissa, and she looks at herself in the mirror, and she says, "I look like myself, Lucy Carlisle." And she says that right after she's basically describing how she looks like a mess from, all the fighting that they've done, from traveling to the other side. But usually in moments like that, previously in the series, she would have said she looked like an agent. But now she's just like, I looked like myself. So we see her growing in her conception of herself and her identity. She's finally allowing herself to expand and grow. She's feeling more comfortable in her own skin. And she's learning to see the way that she presents herself in the world in a completely new way. And that's really what a lot of this is about, being open to the differing perspectives that these things can have in the world, what they can teach us about ourselves, the different symbolisms and messages that we can take from them. And it's just been an absolute delight to dig into all of these layers of meaning. So I'm so glad, Mairead, that you joined me today for this conversation.
I feel extremely privileged to have gotten all your research fruits, like, to be the first audience for them. It was absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for everything you added to this conversation. If you have thoughts about all of this, we would love to hear. You can email us at hauntingthenarrativepod@gmail.com. You can also find us on all the social media sites. All those links are in the show notes. And we look forward to chatting again with you really soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.